Good evening, everyone. So I'm Mazen Aref. I'm a director at Stepstone Group, private markets fund based out of La Jolla in London. About 720 billion of AUM, about 30 offices globally, about 1,200 employees. I'm responsible for origination and fundraising across Southern Europe and the Middle East. I'm a Royal Holloway, ex-Royal Holloway student, and I was contacted by you, Loreen, via LinkedIn, and it's a pleasure to be with you guys today.
Amazing, amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of what your Royal Holloway experience was like, any societies that you were part of, kind of how you found it?
I think I may have joined part of the economic societies a couple of times here and there. I actually joined second year. I was in Sussex first year, and then I joined second year. So I actually didn't have the campus experience. And most people were in Founders Building, and they had the experience of the nice building. But I was more in the labs, and things have changed now. So yeah, it was good. I was commuting pretty much every day, mostly playing football. I was part of the football team here. So yeah, just uni home football, basically. That was that.
Amazing. So then where did the interest in finance come from? Because you started in biomed.
Yeah. So personal story, one of my best friends, he's Japanese, and his father had a long-only hedge fund growing up. So I would always be going to his office and just kind of got exposed to the finance world. As I was saying earlier, I wanted to apply to medicine. I studied biomedical sciences thinking that I was going to go into medicine. But as I was saying, I think we're too young. At the age of 15, 16, yes, that's kind of what I was passionate about. But I still don't think that you fully know, you're not fully formed as a person at the age of 15, 16, and then that kind of dictates what you're going to do during your A-levels and during university. And so I was always in touch with him, always was doing trading on the side of things. And then when I had graduated, I thought, I don't really want to go into medicine. I want to, pursue finance. And that's kind of, so I had that idea kind of concrete in my head, I'd say last year of uni. And then from there, I just kind of went fully in full throttle into trying to apply to finance.
Oh, okay, interesting. What was your experience like applying to finance roles as someone who did my
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. I mean, you speak to recruiters left, right, and centre, and they say, we accept everybody from all walks of life. That's definitely not true. You have to have thick skin. I was just applying left, right, and centre. Was doing, financial modelling, whether in, I think, Wall Street Oasis, just had all of these investment banking books. And as I was saying earlier, I think what helped me is the fact, speaking different languages. So my first role out of university, I worked in Société Générale, the French private bank, and they wanted someone who's a French, Arabic, and Spanish speaker to cover these sorts of these markets. And that was a kind of an interim role, but that was my first foot through the back door, as it were, because most investment banking schemes they're going to take people from Oxbridge or certain universities. But to be honest, it's mostly about just having a lot of thick skin and just networking through conferences, and it's exactly what you did, like cold calling and cold emailing. It's as terrible as it sounds, that's the only way forward. Like there's no one way to do it, right? If that's your ultimate goal, it's just to, reach out to someone and say, can I have a 10-minute coffee with you just to understand your career? Most people will be open to that. I don't think anybody should be averse to having a 10, 15-minute coffee. So that's the advice I'd give.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Because I've done a lot of reaching out myself. I've had only like a few bad experiences, but most experiences people are really, really willing to help. So 100%, I'd say reach out.
Yep.
And everyone who I've met has said that they have most of the time gotten experiences through someone that they knew. There was a job opening, they heard about it, they sent the CV, things like that.
Yep.
So yeah, 100%, I resonate with that.
Yep.
So what else do we have? So then, was there not a way where you leveraged your non-finance background maybe to stand out in the process?
Leverage my I mean, I wanted to apply to, I guess, healthcare-focused funds, healthcare-focused. I mean, I did invest in banking for a bit, and I focused on the healthcare team, bit in TMT, bit in healthcare. So try to push that as much as I can. But at the same time, as I said earlier, it wasn't easy. But also the languages part. I guess having a quirky background did help in a way. But still, if naturally speaking, if someone is going to say to you, we have someone who's graduated from banking and finance and you did biomed, the bias is going to be towards that. So there's not much you can do in terms of I can't change my background. But I think leveraging your personal skills, and I also really think it depends on your personality. Like, we'll get into it later, but in private equity or private markets, it's not just a guy doing deals, right? You have the operations team, you have the value creations team, you have the fundraising team. And I always think that you can always teach someone a DCF, an LBO, a financial model, but it's much more difficult to teach someone how to read a room, how to have good EQ. There are plenty of good people who are super smart, great at modeling, but terrible in a room. They can't read a room. You have to know when to push, when to follow up, when not to follow up. So yeah, just having good EQ is also very important. I think it's something that's missed.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So let's go a little bit more into your experiences. So what are kind of like your day-to-day tasks?
So usually in fundraising, it depends on the markets you're covering, but you would have an understanding of all of your LPs. So your LPs, so every fundraiser, as it were, you'd have a specific geographic remit. So someone who's covering Francophone Europe, someone who's covering the Middle East, the US, and you would be usually, depending on the fund size, you'd be covering LP types. So you'd cover sovereign wealth funds, governments, endowments and foundations, single multifamily offices, consultants, and pension funds, public, private and corporate pension funds. So you would be the relationship manager, as it were, and consistently have a line of dialogue with these people, know exactly what their portfolios are looking like, have quarterly updates. And so you'd be the main point of contact. And so when you have a specific product that's coming, like, say at Stepstone, you're covering private equity, venture growth, private credit, infrastructure and real estate, you would know exactly what fits their portfolio, what doesn't fit their portfolio. So you're not selling all the time, but you're constantly giving market updates. You're also being a solution provider. Let's say one of these LPs wants to sell one of their stakes. So you have to be able to provide liquidity on the secondary market. So you'll be speaking to our secondaries team. So that's more, I guess, the interpersonal side of things when you're speaking and having updates with your LPs, who are ultimately your clients. And these are going to stay with you for the rest of your career, right? Like, irrespective if you move, if you've done a good job. The good thing, I guess, about fundraising compared to being a deal maker or on the investment team is that on the investment team, if you leave the firm, the deal is the firm's, right? Whereas, yes, technically they say the LPs are also the firms, but these people, they've known you for X number of years. So your network is your net worth, and I think that's really important to have, especially in private equity, which is really small. And then you'd be speaking to the investment teams, right? You have to understand the portfolio updates. We've done new deal, what's happened to the NAV, what's happened to the numbers just in general. So you'd have to amalgamate all the information, synthesize it, and make sure you're ready to present it when you're speaking to your clients.
Amazing. Ultimately.
And also you're speaking to your research team, so what's happening with the Middle East, how's that affecting their portfolio? And you have to be able to speak with confidence. If something drops, if an LP's portfolio drops or something shifts, you have to be able to, translate that and communicate that effectively and with confidence, right? Because there's no such thing as constant alpha. There's going to be always downturns in any sort of market, and it's just how you maintain that line of dialogue with your LPs.
Okay. So yeah, you talked a lot about kind of these soft skills, kind of the speaking confidently, even if something goes wrong, being able to explain that, things like that. How would you, if you were a student kind of our age, how would you practice those skills?
Wow, good question. Interviews, even mock interviews, always helped, even if you're getting 20 no's. I know it's terrible again, but you're constantly curating your story. And as I said, if you're reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, having a coffee, just speak with confidence and just always ask the right questions. Just be curious and ask about the market, ask about the role. And as I said, most people should be open to that. But I wouldn't say there's a specific way to. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. But yeah, definitely the confidence shows. Like if you're speaking to someone who's high up, a director and a partner. Yeah, it's coming with the right questions, and even if of course you're not going to be as knowledgeable as him or her, but just taking an interest and asking the right questions goes a very long way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's very good advice actually. So, because not everyone here has a finance background. We have students who are law students. We have computer science students, we have students from all over. So to someone who maybe has a very, very basic understanding of economics, how would you explain private equity, private markets, and kind of what you do?
So private markets is essentially everything's private. So public markets, think of stocks, Amazon, Google, Facebook, publicly traded. Private markets, there's information asymmetry, and whether they're loans or companies, they're not publicly traded, essentially. And so what you do is because of this illiquidity premium, LPs will make the most of that, and they'll generate that alpha for them, and the managers in turn will get their performance, their carry, and their management fees. So what happens is, in a typical, I guess, private equity deal, is you have part equity and leverage. So that's why it's called the leverage buyout deal. So whether the leverage is going to be mezzanine, unitranche, or whatever type of leverage you're going to come in to deal with, and so the LP is going to come in with the equity, essentially, and with the LP's money as well as the GP, so you as the fund manager, the general partner, you come in with your own equity. Usually you're going to commit, I'd say, 10% of the fund size into the overall fund. And then you have the LP money. Let's say it's $1 billion fund. You're going to have, 90% of that is going to come in from LPs, and the rest of the 10% is going to come from the GP. But within the equity, you still are using debt. So the debt providers can be banks, or they can be private credit funds. And so from there, you're going to buy up private companies. And I guess the interesting thing is, you would sometimes be speaking to a family-run company that's been run for the past 100 years, and they need to take it to the next level. And you'd be there originating. So part of what's really interesting in private equity is you're partnering with some of these families and enterprises that have been long run, and you're taking them onto the next step of their journey. And so you then have a value add and operational team that goes in and improves the operational inefficiencies in the company, and you improve the overall structure, the capital structure in the company. And then you then sell that. Once you then buy these companies, that's now private, and you improve that over 5-6 years. And then you would sell that onto the public market, whether it's an IPO if you're in venture capital, which is an initial public offering, or you're going to sell that to a larger private equity firm that still feels that there's some value to be extracted, or you'd sell it to a strategic, whether it's in tech, Microsoft or Oracle or whatever it may be. So just think of it as public markets are highly liquid. You can buy them on exchanges. Private markets are companies that are illiquid, and you get an upside. You're paid for this illiquidity premium, and the fund life, you're locked up essentially for, in private equity, you call it 8-10 years, right? So you have an initial investment period, which is called the J curve. That's where your money's not called up front. So let's say you're an investor, a family office, and you've invested 10 million in a $100 million fund. Everything is prorated, everything is pari passu, which means that your 10 million is not called up straight away. It's as and when we have a deal, we will call a portion of your capital. That's called a capital call. That capital then goes towards buying that deal. And part of that buying the deal is you have the operational team that goes in and says, okay, we need to sometimes get rid of a specific management, right? This CFO or this CEO we need to get rid of them. We need to do X, Y, Z. We need to do cross-border transactions. We need to do organic and inorganic growth. So actually the investment, so how it works is the fundraising team raises the capital. Then that gets passed on to the deal team, which essentially locates and finds these deals, as I said, these family-run companies, depending on the sector you're in. And then you have the operational and value creation team that then actually improves the overall health of the company, and then it's sold. Okay. So that's kind of the difference in public and private. So.
Okay, that was very clear and very helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, and just describing fundraising specifically, so there's a lot of kind of like negotiation involved, convincing, because you have to convince people that this is something that they should put their money into.
Yeah.
So kind of what is your experience with that? Have you grown in that during your career, and kind of what are your experiences with that?
Yeah, there are certain firms, unfortunately, that are going to be telling you to push a specific product on an LP, right? Ultimately, I've never been a fan of burning your bridges, ever, especially in an industry that's so small, such as private equity. If an LP is saying to you, for example, hey Mazen, I'm interested in venture capital, and I'm in my firm and I say, well, look at my infrastructure fund and I'm selling you a menu, there's a lot of cheesy salesmen out there, or a lot of cheesy fundraisers in loads of industries, but in particular in private markets. And that's the worst thing you can do, because a lot of people will remember that. And if you're not just an active listener, the number one thing is just listen. If you don't have something that correlates to their portfolio at that current time, just be helpful, discuss the market, even make introductions. So as a general gist, most LPs are going to ask for the firm track record, what the return drivers are, what their current returns are, the team composition, how long has the team been together. Usually if it's a first-time fund, it's much more difficult to raise unless you have a very solid anchor investor. Anchor investor means someone who's a big name, whether it's like a public pension fund, a private pension fund, the sovereign wealth fund, like I don't know, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. It's a very big name. So raising a first-time fund is very difficult. But if you're someone who's established, it makes fundraising much easier. So you have to also be very smart and understand the numbers. But to a certain extent, you're at the behest of the quality of the product that you have. If you're in a firm that has terrible track record, 0.1 DPI over the last 7 years, it's a difficult race, right? But what makes things easy is if you have co-investments. So most LPs, you don't want to be paying fees. Well, everybody's going to be paying fees. Usually in private equities, 2 and 20, which is 2% management fee and 20% performance fee, which is carried interest. So if you're able to make it sweeten the deal and have co-investments, because co-investments usually are fee-free, carry-free, then you're building a relationship with the LP. So there's different ways how to, even if you have not the best of track records, to be able to sell the story better. But it's just very important to be cognizant always that the LP is the ultimate client. So yeah, I've learned over the years to just not be consistently pushy. Even if upper management will say, hey, you need to push XYZ product, you don't want that to come and affect you in the future, because if you burn a bridge, it's sometimes difficult to get it back.
Okay, yeah, so private equity is very relationship based.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing. I feel like a lot of those types of kind of like wealth management, things like that, because you're dealing with people's money, so they're very relationship based. So,
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I feel like we're not really taught as students, especially wanting to go into finance. It's always make sure you have your Excel skills on track, make sure that you can, use the Excel shortcuts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really taught that. That's actually what sets you apart, your ability to connect with people and your ability to build meaningful relationships.
Well, to add on to your point, the Excel part is critical. Like if you're on the deal team in investment banking, your Excel skills have to be top notch, without a doubt. But if you're working in fundraising, and that takes a bit of time, because usually you have to have that solid foundation of understanding the numbers to be able to explain those numbers and convince someone to invest, right? So unless you don't know how to build the basics and understand the numbers, how are you ever going to be able to build relationships and then thereafter sell? So yeah, the fundamentals are critical, but I also have been in rooms with senior figures who are great at numbers, but they're not great at transposing and transmitting what's on paper to the LP.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you say that would set you apart as like someone who's good at the job versus someone who's great
Absolutely.
at the job? Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah, so kind of going back to LBOs, right, that you mentioned, this is just periodic curiosity, but obviously you've heard of the Paramount Warner Brothers deal.
No, I haven't.
Oh, no.
No, I haven't recently.
So,
I've been in a war zone, so I haven't been keeping up to date.
Yeah, fair enough. But essentially, so what happened is Paramount is now going to actually buy Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. It's going to be I think the biggest leverage buyout to date, after the one with EA recently, which was only in like August. So that's already crazy that they're already topping it. But yeah, the thing is that Paramount is significantly smaller than Warner Brothers. I think they're like 20%. They have like 20% equity valuation compared to Warner Brothers. So yeah, there are definitely some concerns about like media control, because Warner Brothers owns like CNN and is it CBS Families and things like that. Yeah. So and then it was either Paramount or Netflix. They offered an all-cash deal, but they didn't want it enough, so they didn't match the Paramount deal in the end.
Yeah, I mean, in any LBO transaction, that you're going to have a majority owner and a minority owner, and usually the majority owner you're going to have drag rights, which means essentially you drag them along. You don't really have a say. Yeah. And then the one that is the minority owner has tag along rights, so you're tagging along what the majority owner has. So that's the unfortunate thing, right? In an LBO deal, you're going to have majority and minority. Yeah. Right. So yeah, they're going to be able to push their legal documents much stronger on the minority owner. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens, especially with the media control, because then it becomes kind of like a monopoly essentially, right? Because then Paramount will own essentially all of the major news broadcasting networks in the United States. So that could prove quite problematic, considering the owner's political connections. So we'll see how that develops. Yeah. But is there maybe a deal that you've worked on, or something that you've worked on that stands out to you? And,
recently working on the SpaceX deal. So that's going to go public with XAI no longer than probably June. We were sitting with Musk and their CFOs probably like 2 months ago. I think there's still value to be extracted. There is a bit of an AI bubble, especially what's going on now in the Middle East. I think a lot of the sovereigns that have pumped in nearly $1 trillion into AI in the US. That remains to be seen. I think there is relative value to be extracted, but there is a huge like bolt-on aggregation play in AI.
Yeah.
And it remains to be seen. AI is a huge buzzword, and valuations have just gone through the roof. But we think with what SpaceX is doing, I think it's super interesting. So especially with what they're doing in space with Starlink, and the monopoly that they have, I think it's going to be very difficult for people to leapfrog them.
Yeah, just to catch everyone up, SpaceX is trying to buy XAI, right?
Yep.
They're trying to acquire XAI. Okay, yeah, just to catch everyone up, because I don't know if everyone is too familiar with that. But so, kind of, what is your understanding of that deal specifically? What are they trying to use the AI for in there?
I can't really disclose a lot of the information because it's pretty proprietary. But
Okay.
you'll find out in June once it goes public.
Oh, okay, sounds
You'll
good.
find out in June.
Should we be worried?
I wouldn't say you should be worried. I think AI has its uses, but I think there is also naturally a lot of things at stake. A lot of jobs will naturally be taken.
Right.
Like at what stage is it useful as opposed to it being detrimental?
Yeah.
Right. That's the question that I even think that the tech giants don't even know themselves.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, yeah, force for good as opposed to a force of evil. So.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think a lot of us in the room are kind of concerned right now with because a lot of us are trying to enter the job market right now, and we know that Anthropic with Claude, they've been trying to essentially replace financial analysts.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I've heard.
Yeah, it's not very good just yet. I tried to get it to fix like a cash flow model I was working on, and it did not do a good job. So we're still safe for now. Okay, well, so when it comes to private equity specifically, why private equity and not public markets?
Private equity, you have much more control, and you can actually have tangible input into the growth and exit of a company. Public markets, you're at the behest of different markets. If Strait of Hormuz or Iran's going up and oil's going up, inflation's going to increase thereafter, and then you're going to have interest rates going up, and that can affect the underlying portfolio companies. Don't get me wrong, private markets, they lag publics by a bit. But in terms of the actual value add, you don't have an operational value add team in public markets, right? It's you be able to trade, yes, you can make money, but the relationship building and the management that you grow internally with the company, sometimes it can last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You don't get that in public market sales and trading, for example. Yeah. So the human touch for me has always been very important. Okay. Building relationships and having that actual value add, right, as opposed to just selling market beta on an exchange.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that's very interesting. I'm just looking at some of the questions here that I have. So what are your thoughts on leadership and what separates a good leader from a great leader?
I think it's really important. I'm not obviously going to name names, but there's a lot of people, even senior managers, that are really good at their job, but they're terrible leaders. And I genuinely think not enough managers go through like leadership courses or skills to be able to run a team. Again, the human interaction is critical. Right, if you're not able to harmonize specific personalities in a team, if you know that 2-3 people are very hard-headed or alphas, you know that they're going to clash, right? So it's about having the know-how to pick the right people and not just delegate tasks, but give someone the ability to grow, right? There are certain managers that are going to be breathing down your neck, don't want to give you trust and space to grow. Naturally, people are going to make mistakes. So a good manager is someone that wants to give you enough space to grow and empathizes with you, but at the same time will, slap you on the wrist when something needs to be fixed up, So being a trusted confidant, but not being too far away. Because there are certain managers that are too busy and they don't really know what you're doing. And that sometimes happens to a lot of analysts. You're reporting to a senior VP or an MD who doesn't even see you, and yet, they're responsible for providing your annual review at the end of the year. So definitely understanding different personalities in a team and how a team bodes well together is something that is usually overlooked. Yeah. So again, not every person who's very good at their job is a good manager and can lead a team. That's why you have most CEOs, some of them aren't super technical, but they have a great understanding as to how each and every portion of the company, fits together like it's Lego. So that there's no set answer. But I still think it's down to having a good EQ, for sure.
Sounds good. And when it comes to your leadership style, how have you developed it in a way that you think best motivates people?
In terms of me delegating with people who are junior to me, to be honest, I don't run a huge team. So I've got 3 juniors underneath me. So it's not like I'm running a whole department, because naturally I'm focusing on the Middle East and Southern Europe. But it's, for example, in fundraising, if you have someone junior to you, it's giving them space to cover a specific tier. Okay, go and run with these tier 2 family offices in Jeddah or Riyadh or whatever it is, you know, and go and call them and see and meet them, and giving them that space to grow. And you know, they'll naturally come back to you if there's an issue. So it's being on top of their case, but also giving someone space to make their own mistakes, and then owning those mistakes and then rectifying them. And the same thing applies if on the investment team, you know, you're going to mess up on a DCF, you're going to mess up on an LBO, but you're only going to make mistakes. The only way you'll get better is if you make mistakes, right? And if you have the onus, if it's on you and you're able to go back to your senior and you know, try and constantly improve, that's the only way you're going to get better. So it's giving space to the juniors, but also being there as their senior as and when mistakes happen. Yeah. But also just letting them navigate it, you know, giving them the freedom, but at the same time, you have the ultimate oversight.
Yeah. How do you kind of strike the balance between that? Because I'm obviously president of the society, and so sometimes I do have to delegate and, you know, love my committee, but no, they're great. But then sometimes I'm like, okay, well, this needs to be done then, and you know, so sometimes I find myself wanting to almost just do it myself, because I'm like, I know how I want it done, and obviously I don't expect everyone to read my mind either. So I'm like, okay, I know how to get it done, so let me just do it. But obviously I don't want to overstep, because like they still want to do their roles. And well, my modus operandi in terms of my management style is be very transparent. XYZ, there's a deliverable that needs to be, the deadline is XYZ date, and I'm not going to chase you. If it's not done, it's on you. Right. Simple as that. I'm going to give you all the freedom. If you're mature enough to then be up to the task and there's a specific deadline, then show me what you got. If you don't, and there's a specific reason, not, you know, my dog ate my homework or whatever it is, then it doesn't look well, it doesn't reflect well. Right, because if someone is giving you the trust to do and carry out a specific task, and if you can't execute, then, you know, that's on you. Certain people, other managers would, you know, be constantly, you know, where's this document, where's this model? That's not my specific style. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I'll give you 100% trust, but deliver. Okay. If there's an issue on the way, come and talk to me. Doors are always open. But I'm not the type of person to constantly be chasing a junior for a specific deliverable. Okay. That's not my style. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Okay. So in terms of hiring patterns, is there anything specifically that you've noticed? Any shifts? Anything that people are preferring now? Because obviously people are... Really depends on the role. Yeah. It really depends on the role. I mean, again, in Stepstone, you've got operations analysts, you've got legal analysts, you've got fundraising, investments. So it really depends as and when there's a need in a specific department. Like I couldn't tell you that there's a specific requirement now for more fundraisers as opposed to more investment professionals. It really depends. But again, depending on where we are in the market cycle, like for example, right now, there's a lot more interest in private credit. So we're seeing much more interest in credit as opposed to private equity primaries. So I'd say on that front, it can be a reflection. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag. But yeah, depending as and when you need more reinforcements in a specific market segment or asset class, then you need more reinforcements. Okay, and within private market roles, are there any personality traits that there's maybe a bit of shift to? Because now with AI, a lot of people, and also the accessibility now as well of different courses, things like that, a lot of people are getting, everyone can do Excel, everyone can create a model, things like that. So have you noticed any kind of shifts in what recruiters maybe ask for?
perhaps specific deal exposure or deal knowledge, like in the market, right? If you have a good foundation in building a financial model, that's great. But great question you asked earlier, like, you know, what's happening with SpaceX, or if there's a specific deal, that will definitely make you stand out, right? You know, what's happening right now with Blue Owl in private credit or BCred. If you're able to just understand and be curious, again, I think curiosity makes you stand out much more than just, you have to have a solid foundation. But I don't think that there's something specific people look at.
Okay.
I think, you know, both the technicals and fundamentals, as well as understanding global macro, right, in specific deals. I think that would make someone senior, you know, it'll make you stand out, I think.
Okay, so you're saying a lot of maybe, you know, researching different deals, understanding them. Would it help as well to maybe reach out to people specifically in the industry? Obviously, there's some things that they can't disclose. I can appreciate that, but maybe they don't understand something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As I said, if you're having a coffee chat and you're interested in, you know, like I said, this Blue Owl deal or BCred with Blackstone, and you know you're speaking to a private credit guy, he'd probably want to be like, okay, that's intriguing. How did you find out about that? As an intern or someone who hasn't even found the job yet. So absolutely, as opposed to someone who's, yes, I'm passionate about private equity or private credit or private banking. It's good to these are the topics that we're speaking to right now with our clients, right? Specific deals, things that have blown up. The current market conditions with the Iran war, how does that affect, you know, your overall portfolio? So things that are live right now, I think is really useful to bring it to life.
Okay, and just in terms of skill building, because obviously it is very difficult to get kind of through the door and get that first internship, get that first opportunity. How, if you were in our position right now, what would you focus on? How would you build the skills in order to prepare yourself for the application?
I mean, I had investment banking books. I forgot, it was one by Rosenbaum. I forgot which one it was. Used, I think it was called Wall Street Oasis or Street of Walls. Some of these, you know, LBO packages that they have online, and that was really useful. It was very, very useful. You know, going into interviews, you're going to go through 6, 7, 8 rounds, and the first 2, 3 rounds are going to be technicals. So that was extremely useful. The part that I think it really comes down on the personality and your confidence is how you come across. Right. That's something that I think everybody has a specific style, how to improve. Like you know your fortes, you know what you're good at, you know what you're not so good at. But I think technicals, you know, if you got, I think, swathes of things online that you can use. And they're all very similar. I remember, you know, whether it was the investment banking books or Wall Street Oasis, they were pretty decent. Comparing, like they were, pretty much like for like. So technicals for sure. Especially if you're going for a technical role, you have to have the technicals on point.
I know that some companies, they run like training sessions. For example, with Eastdil Secured, because I'm interested in real estate finance, real estate private equity, things like that. So Eastdil Secured runs a summer program. They still have the applications open for that. So just like look it up if you're interested. But it's quite like an intense program. You go over different asset types, different value drivers for each asset type, different valuation methods, different financing methods as well, and also obviously the cash flow model, amortization tables, things like that. So you go through like all of those things. So I know that exists. And then also something that I've done are competitions. So there's trading competitions, investment competitions, things like that. That definitely exist. So that's just a personal tip from me and from my experience that is also out there.
I'd also say, other than you know, the usual going out on LinkedIn, what I find is super useful is conferences. So there are certain conferences. There's one called Super Investor. There's Institutional Investor. Those are probably 2 of the top ones that take place globally in London, in the Middle East, and you have a myriad of C-suite professionals there. Even if you're there at the door, you know, and you want to just say hi to someone, or you know, have a 5-minute chat with someone. So conferences, I think, are super useful and actually 100%. Very much undervalued.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've definitely been at networking events where I was the only student there, but you stand out for that reason, because you're the only student there, and then they're kind of intrigued. They're like, oh, how did you get here? And you know, things like that. So it's very good.
And one thing that's really important, I know it sounds very cheesy and cliche, but you're going to have thick skin. Even fundraising, you're going to be I'll sometimes be speaking to 50 LPs. You get 49 no's and you get 1 LP that says, yes, I'm going to come in with a 500 million ticket, for example. Same thing on the deal side. You're going to be speaking to 10, 20 companies, and you're going to be competing against different funds that have better capital structures compared to you. You have to have thick skin.
100%.
You know, if you're going to be speaking and networking, yeah, you're going to be speaking to 20 guys, 19 will say no. The 20th guy may take a 2-minute coffee chat with you.
Yeah.
So as terrible as it is, and yeah, some people in the private equity industry are sharks, as it were, but you should just not care.
Yeah.
You know, and not in an arrogant way, in a pretentious way, but just continue plowing, right? And again, if applying online, yeah, everybody's doing the same thing. So speak to recruiters for sure. Go and have coffee with recruiters. Again, I always highlight the human touch. If you're speaking to someone on the phone or on a computer, they have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
You know, shaking someone's hand, looking someone in the eye, I think this is really important. So speaking to recruiters in person, conferences, I think, are second to none.
What was kind of your first experience with networking, maybe as a student or as kind of a young professional? What was kind of something that stood out from that?
That stood out? I've always, I mean, funny story. So when I was younger, I used to play play professional football for Queen's Park Rangers, and it was kind of similar, the mindset, in the sense that you go on trial and you'd have like 10 clubs that will tell you no, and then you'd have one club that will give you a trial,
Yep.
right? So it's just having the I don't care mentality, right? And not being bogged down, I think it's really important, because that's going to be part and parcel of your career. In any career, I don't even think it's just private equity. If you're in tech, if you're in media, if you're in whatever it is, you're going to have so many people, for better or for worse, telling you no. And you just have to not care.
Yeah.
And as if that person didn't exist, just go on to the next one. So having that mindset, I think, is really important, and you'll build such thick skin.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's underrated. Yeah, initially it's daunting, right? When you're in a room with people who are C-suite professionals, and you know, some of them are super successful managing directors or partners in funds and firms, but everybody started out somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like that person started out as an intern, or started out as someone who is a budding investment banking analyst, or whatever it may be. So just continuously plow on, don't care, but I would say don't solely focus on applying online.
Yeah.
Because again, with AI and computers, they don't know how you are as a person. They don't.
100%.
So I think that piece is really important.
In recent years, that is something, I mean, I say in recent years, I think in the last year, that's really what I realized. Especially last year, I was a second year, so I was really in the summer internship applying cycle. Some of you are in that cycle right now. It's not fun. I was just applying, and I wasn't getting through to it, and I didn't understand why. But then when I started actually speaking to people, I realized how relationship-based this industry is, and how helpful it is to actually know people, which obviously I didn't have, because neither one of my parents are in finance. But it's definitely helpful to actually seek out these opportunities. And often, if you're the only student there, you do stand out. That's what I've noticed, at least in my conversations. And people are intrigued to then kind of speak to you. I've definitely had some people who were not so enthusiastic to speak to me, but yeah, as you said, you just kind of.
Yeah, you shouldn't care. You shouldn't care. You'll find good people, and you find
100%.
not the nicest people. So
yeah, you don't want to be connected to those people anyway if they're not very nice people. So it doesn't really matter in the end. That's kind of how I see it personally.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And just circling back kind of to the multicultural aspect, right? How do you navigate that? Because obviously you have pretty international background. You speak several languages. So how does that kind of affected your path into finance?
Yeah, I guess speaking language is very important. So I'm originally Egyptian, but raised in London all my life. Speak several languages, and that definitely helps for sure. Again, if you're covering specific markets, any additional language is super important. You know, like Asia is such a humongous market right now that is underserved. A lot of the guys in London, in our London market, they don't really speak that, right? And then we've gotten some interns in our Beijing office or Hong Kong office, and I think pitching to someone in their native language, again, it's completely different, right? It's night and day. I mean, you speak French, right? When you're speaking to a French person in a room, yes, they understand English, but the moment you switch in French, it's very much different. So I think understanding different cultures and languages, I think, really helps you. Bringing it back to fundraising, every single person has a specific remit. So you have the DACH market, so whoever speaks German or Dutch or French, and that will open another door for sure, right? Because you bring something that maybe a senior deal maker doesn't have, right? Which is speaking someone in their native language and providing that comfort. So I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Very important if there's an additional language.
100%. Are there any challenges that you've faced maybe from coming from kind of like a background that isn't, well, you know, that we don't see every day, kind of like in London and things like that? Have you?
What do you mean?
Like, are there any challenges that you faced? Maybe people, I don't know, like stereotyping or underestimating your ability to do something?
In private equity?
Yeah.
Not really.
No?
I mean, look, I can't read people's minds.
Of course.
Certain people have specific beliefs, they'll have preconceived notions, they may think of you X, Y, Z, but my mindset is I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less. I'll perform and let the numbers do the talking. Simple as that.
Yeah.
There's going to be office politics anywhere you work. You have to be able to navigate that. Not everybody is going to have your back. I think what's really important and one of the best things that I had learned is, I think two things. So the first thing I think that I was taught by my mentor is you need to have three things in your career that make sense. A job that you enjoy doing, people that you enjoy working with, and you make a decent amount of living. Private equity, unfortunately, yeah, in private markets, certain personalities aren't the nicest. If you're working with people who are just terrible, but you're making decent money and you kind of enjoy your job, you'll be hating your life. So those three, you kind of have to make a balance. A lot of people, they say, oh, I want to go work for X fund. And that fund or that firm or that bank has a terrible reputation. Again, beggars can't be choosers, and I understand, as a graduate, you want to grab onto whatever you have. But I'm saying as you become more senior in your career, no, working with the right people is it's paramount. There's no need to be working with, not the nicest of people, right? And I think what's also the other piece is having a key sponsor. So even if you're in a firm, even if you're reporting to your direct line manager, I've seen a lot of interns and analysts that will just buddy up to their manager, right? And they'd be trying to be super close to them and sometimes throw other people under the bus, or other interns and analysts. And that's the worst way to play it, the worst way. The correct way is you have to have a key sponsor who is your manager or someone else in the firm, because in good times, they'll be able to say, Mazen, Loreen, they did well, so, get a promotion or whatever it is. And in the bad times, if something happens, someone messed up, they'll have your back, right? But having key sponsors and having good relationships with key decision makers, irrespective of your asset class. I mean, I'm working across asset classes, and my boss, technically, he's in private credit. Doesn't mean that I don't build relationships with other people in the firm, right? So that piece is very important, not just buddying up. And I know certain analysts, you have to appease your senior, as it were, but you have to play the long game, and you have to be able to be smart and build relationships across different parts of the firm.
Yeah. Definitely. Could also be helpful because sometimes for a deal you need certain information and everything, then you have a contact.
Of course, if sometimes you have a deadline and you need that from a certain person, let's say he doesn't like you or you've rubbed him off the wrong way, compared to another guy that is close to different people and they say, hey man, can you ping me that email? Sorry, it's a deadline. And people are going to help each other. So it's about, again, being smart and building the right relationships. Because a lot of people have sharp elbowed. Some people can be successful initially in their career when you're sharp elbowed, but people remember it and they're not the nicest to work with in the future. And a lot of them don't tend to be that successful.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. That's definitely one of the main takeaways, I think, from this talk, how relationship based it is and kind of the importance of maintaining good relations. Because a lot of shows and movies that depict finance, they really depict it as kind of like a cutthroat, like stabbing each other in the back and things like that.
You do have that, not and depending on where you are. Have I experienced that? Yes, but you have to be able to manage that.
Yeah.
Again, not everybody is going to take a liking to you in life, right? I'm not a philosopher, but it applies to your career, to friends. Not everyone's going to love you, but you have to be able to build the right relationships, and you always have to, have your own back and cover your tracks. Sort of thing, right? Because sometimes if something goes wrong, people be pointing fingers. So that's even more of a point why it's important to build the right relationships, because
100%.
somebody can have your back in certain environments that can be cutthroat.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you've seen many shows or movies related to finance, but if you kind of are interested in those, is there one that you think depicts finance the most accurately from your experience?
Not Wolf of Wall Street for sure. In private equity, not as much. In investment banking, maybe margin call.
Okay.
When something is really going bad, you'll get called at 1 a.m. and go and report to the MD and it's like,
Right.
what the F happened sort of thing. But private equity is less like that, right? Because the covenants and structures and the way you diligence a deal is not like investment banking at all. You'll be doing due diligence, operational, financial, legal due diligence on a company for 2, 3, 4 months before executing, right? So you would have gotten to know management, the team, the overall finance of a company for a very long time before. So yes, things can go, things can go tits up. Yes, for sure. But it's not like investment banking.
Right.
It's not like that. And usually, if there is an issue, you have a direct line with the underlying company, with the portfolio companies, to say, X, Y, Z has happened, and there's a reason as to why that has happened, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, Microsoft has laid off 3,000 workers and deal with it, right?
Good
sort
luck.
of thing. So it's much more personal, it's much more tailored, much more relationship driven.
Yeah.
There is that illiquidity premium. You have the ability to genuinely make change and improve a company. As opposed to riding the market in public markets.
Okay.
Hence the reason why I've enjoyed it much more.
Okay. Well, just out of curiosity, have you watched that show on HBO, Industry?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it. About it.
It's quite heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen all of it. It's very heavy. So yeah, I mean, then I can't really ask you how realistic it is. Maybe if you, I don't know. I don't know if I'd even recommend it. It's very heavy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of very dark themes. I don't know if anyone here has seen it, but yeah. All right. So just some last bits of advice before we get on to the questions, because I know some people have
Sure.
questions. So, just what it's like if you had to go back in time and tell yourself one thing, if you were from your time at Royal Holloway, what's the piece of advice that you'd give yourself?
If I was to go back in time.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have made my life easier if I had done a pure play, I guess, finance, economics, or banking and finance background. That would have just made applying easier, but I know it's tough for everybody. I definitely would have, the networking piece and having thick skin, I think at an early age, it does seem daunting, but if I had that going back in time much earlier, to just kind of not care more, just, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5 rejections, it shouldn't affect you. Yeah. I think having that mindset, it's less of a skill, it's more of a mindset, and I think that comes with time and experience. Would have probably served me better earlier on in the application processes, as it were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when is kind of one of the main things that you have kept with you from your experience at Royal Holloway? Wow,
great question. I mean, everything's changed. Even the library's changed.
Yeah.
Actually, football. I'm a huge fan of football. I was playing all the time with the first team here, going to different away matches, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun. So that was it was mostly just studying in the lab or at home and playing football. And there was loads of international students as well. So that was super cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have never thought Royal Holloway would be so international coming into it. So yeah, just dealing with different cultures and probably the active aspect of it with football.
I think we all got duped by the University of London.
Yeah.
No, because I was looking for university, I was like, oh, this is close to London. They say half an hour away from London. I thought, okay, amazing. I get here. It's no.
Yeah.
It's not the case. No, but I still love it, and I definitely will miss it next year. I've made a lot of very good connections here, a lot of very good friends.
Good.
And a lot of international students, and even students who are not international. All of my friends have some sort of international background, even if they were born and raised in the UK. So there's definitely a lot of different types of people that I've interacted with. So 100% on that. So I want to open the floor to questions now. If you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll pick on you and you can ask your question. Remy?
Yeah, so I've got 2 questions actually. But so I was reading online that Stepstone recently released the 2026 Private Equity General Partners Outlook. With Bain & Co. And this cited pricing as one of the biggest obstacles to deals in 2025. So there's a lot of disagreements on valuations. And I'm just wondering what kind of factors are leading to this currently in private equity?
A lot of it at the moment, I mean, interest rates number one, right? Especially right now, what we're seeing with the Iran war. Oil's going to go up, inflation's going to go up, interest rates are going to go up, and that directly impacts the ability of the underlying portfolio companies to service the debt. Whether you're in venture capital, early stage, late stage, or doing an LBO, The issue is that, you know, debt was cheap 3-4 years ago, and hence why we were on the back of a bull run for the last 3-4 years. But now your inability, you've baked in those assumptions based on credit or your capital structure being at X, and now that it's gone to Y, that's why DPIs, which means your distributions to paid in capital to your LPs have reduced. So interest rates have had a huge run, of course, and policies, right? You know, with Trump saying America first, and that's had an impact on supply chain. So the mid-middle market, you know, we call it the mighty middle market in the US, which is, I guess, the 5th largest economy globally, that was more insulated as opposed to when he came out and said, you know, we're going to give tariffs here and tariffs there, and that affected the larger companies. So geopolitics and interest rates, where the Fed is, that has a huge knock-on effect onto your ability to pay your debt and service the debt, and that has a direct knock-on effect onto your performance.
Right. So also I was wondering, well, thank you obviously for those insights.
Of course.
I was also wondering what you find challenging about managing LP relationships, especially, it's no secret that the markets are so volatile right now with the tech sell-offs and the Iran conflict. So yeah, I'm wondering how you're kind of navigating that in terms of your LP relationships, as well as how Stepstone is kind of hedging against these market movements.
Yeah, no, great question. So I think it also depends on the type of LP. So a lot of retail LPs that aren't, private markets is very long term, right? You have to be able to invest in vintages irrespective of the market conditions. Retail investors naturally, perhaps, you know, for the lack of a better word, aren't as knowledgeable as a pension fund or a sovereign wealth fund that, you know, has billions, if not trillions of AUM, and irrespective of the market, they're going to continue committing. What happens is that some of these investors that are retail, you have to explain to them, actually, when there is a dislocation in the market, you should be putting your money in the market now as opposed to taking it out. And hence, if you saw Blue Owl or BCred, there was a huge redemption of about 7.6%. A lot of it was because of retail. Most people that don't understand markets and their phase and they get scared, they want to pull their money out, right? So but then a lot of these investors, you have to try and educate them. So whether it's single family offices that, you know, whether it's in the Middle East or Europe, who have historically only invested in real estate, and you have to tell them, and actually, look, this is a long-term play. You shouldn't really care about what's going on. Sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, they're less likely to be putting their money out. Unless there's the denominator effect, which means that there's a lot of public sell-off, which results in your private markets portfolio being over-allocated, then you have to then speak to them and say, okay, they actually have to sell, or they cannot commit or re-up. Re-up means they commit into the same fund again. So it's about being very open and communicative, but it depends on what they're looking for in their underlying portfolio. If they're looking to sell, you have to understand what the reason is why they want to sell. Sometimes it's driven by headline risk, right? You have the FT or Bloomberg, they write an article, and some of these guys, they don't really understand the deal. So we'll speak to them, we'll get the research team online, we'll calm things down, and ultimately you're a solutions provider, right? And you know, we have the ability to sell LP interest, whether it's, you know, GP-leds, you know, roll them over into a continuation vehicle, but ultimately be that solutions provider, and just provide the market knowledge. If you have someone coming to you worried about XYZ position, if you come with knowledgeable advice, whether it's, look, this is what's happening, I cannot change it. The Iran war is continuing, interest rates are going to go up. I cannot control the Fed, right? If you speak to them, you know, with complete confidence, then okay, like there's not much you're doing, but you're able to control the credit spreads, or you're able to control the underlying companies. You've got things under control. It's about being communicative, but you can't change the fundamentals of geopolitics or the Fed ultimately. So it depends on. So take-home messages. I think it depends on your LP type. The larger they are, the more sophisticated, the more they understand private markets, the more they'll be less phased about ongoing market issues. The more they're retail investors, the more you have to educate them, and sometimes they pull their money out and you can't really do much.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for making the time to engage with current Royal Holloway students.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
Yes.
So if you don't have any experience at all, and then you want to make your own private equity firm,
Sorry, I can't hear you.
so if you don't have any experience at at all, and then you want to make your own private equity firm,
Mm-hmm.
how would you convince the bank or private creditor to lend you some money for you to buy businesses? Because they would see history of you, they will check credit score, or maybe they will see if your experience.
Mm-hmm.
How do you convince them to lend you some money for you to?
So launching a new private markets firm, private equity or private credit, is that your question? It is definitely difficult. So usually people have spun out from a reputable firm, right? Whether it's whatever it is, Blackstone, Apollo, whatever it may be. And you usually have to have your track record that's attributed. A lot of firms, they don't give you your attributed track record, which means that if you're on a deal team and you've worked on XYZ transaction, certain firms, to keep you, it's not the nicest thing to do, but they won't give you your attributed track record. So if you're launching a new firm and you don't have an attributed track record, it becomes much tougher for you to raise capital. So in general, in fundraising, first-time funds, very difficult. First-time teams, even more difficult. If you have people that have spun out, let's say, 3-4 managing directors or partners in the same firm, they've worked together, you've gone through market cycles, I think that's very important. If one of the first diligence questions, they'd say, have you gone through the GFC? Have you gone through the dot-com bubble? All of these things. If you've been able to navigate through market cycles successfully, and you have an attributed track record, and you have backing through a solid anchor investor, then it makes things easier. It makes things much easier. Usually it takes, on average, for a first-time fund or a first-time team, 1.5 years, 2. So in general right now, fundraising, 80% of fundraising has taken place through 20 to 25% of firms globally. So you can see how much power the large firms are, and it's an AUM aggregation play. But if you have the right experience from a very good name, attributed track record, solid DPI, solid track record, top quartile, top decile, then it makes things easier.
And then, what are the red flags of the company that make you walk out from the deal, even though the cash flow is good, the company structure is good?
That makes me pull out of the deal?
Yeah, go out from the deal.
Well, if your interest coverage ratio, if you're unable to, how do you have non-accruals? Do you have, how much are your PIK toggle features? Your interest coverage ratio, your default ratio, your default rate, your loss rate, all of these things. If I'm a creditor giving you money, so if you're a lender and if you're a borrower and I'm a lender, I'm going to be looking at all of these things, right? Which market segment are you playing in? Is it AI or software? Maybe a bit highly valued at the moment. Do you have significant cash flows? Again, all of these things. So we're seeing a lot more PIK toggle features in the upper mid market. We're seeing a lot more non-accruals. So if you have that, you're less likely to probably get funding through a private credit fund for sure.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Just checking that there's no one behind there. Naya?
Having experience in both the Middle East and Europe markets, how do you adapt your communication style?
On Middle Eastern and European clients, great question. Middle Eastern LPs are very long and relationship driven. Whereas, sometimes in Northern Europe, it can be very transactional, right? If a deal makes sense, let's make sense for me, make sense for you, let's, sign the paperwork and call it a day. Whereas in the Middle East, you can go on 3, 4, 5 roadshows and you have to develop that trust initially. And then you have sort of a sticky money or trust for life. It's not about rocking up in a 3-piece suit and saying this deal is the best. That's the worst way. So culturally in the Middle East, if you do that, you're not really going to get business. Whereas if you're having experienced Swiss LPs or German LPs, yeah, they care about the relationship, but it's more so, does the deal make sense? Does it make sense for me, my underlying LP base? Then sure, they'll execute. So yeah, it really does depend. Asia as well. Asia is very relationship driven as well. Maybe not as much as the Middle East, but they do value relationships. Same thing as in Southern Europe, like the Spaniards, the Italians. You'll go have 3, 4 coffee meetings and just, chit chat for a little bit. The first 10, 15, I always say to some of my Northern European colleagues when I take them on roadshows in the Middle East, it's like, look, first 5, 10 minutes, please do not speak about the deal. Yeah. Just speak about the country. Hi, how are you? What's going on? Right. Don't dive straight in. It's just the worst way to come across. So definitely you would tailor it. Whereas, speaking to a German or a Finn, the Scandinavians, they want straight, just get into the detail if it makes sense. And, they don't want to just cut the crap, as it were. I hope that makes sense. Of course.
Any more questions? Mamoon?
My question was, you mentioned communication is a central theme tonight. From cold outreach to people that you want to work with to people you're making deals with. I wanted your perspective on, you basically said how many no's does it take to get a yes with sales. What else in terms of sales training did you go through to get that mindset? Because when I've been working in sales for like 3 years now.
Yeah.
The first year I internalized a lot of the no's, a lot of the hanging up. What did you do to alter that kind of?
I had that from a very young age. As I was saying, as cheesy as it sounds, through football. You know, going through different trials and just getting 10, 20 no's from different clubs. From a very young age, just kind of had that and had to work on that mindset of just like not caring. It's like, okay, maybe the manager doesn't like you, go to another one. It just really depends. And then you have one person that clicks and likes you and you stay successfully for a while. So I wouldn't say I have a crystal ball. I think it was trial and error, and just having gone through the motions and experienced that yourself, as terrible as it sounds, like you have to experience the lows to be able to then get to the highs, right? You won't be able to be a successful deal maker, a fundraiser, whatever it may be, if you're not going to be rejected. I think every single successful person has been rejected many times until you've had someone that said, yeah, sure, I'll give you a shot. So as you said, you have to internalize it. Like, it's not affecting you personally. It's not you. Maybe that guy, he's just not the nicest of guys, right? Maybe he's just a terrible person. Maybe he's had a terrible day, right? Just brush him aside and continue. That's all I'd say.
How do you go about providing value to someone so much senior than you? Because you can say, oh, I want to speak to you, have a coffee chat, but actually providing value.
So providing value when you're in a firm is different to when you're outside and looking for advice. When you're in a firm, you just want to take as much off of your senior's plate as possible. Just make his life easier. That's your simple number one go-to task. How can I make your life easier? Is it a model? Done. Is it something research? You get it done, right? Before the deadline, nicely formatted, etc., etc. And also looking at what the firm is, not just solely at what your role is and what your task is, but on a firm-wide basis, okay, we're targeting more real estate projects or private credit projects. What does that mean? Helping, speaking to the research team and, you know, being more well-rounded, as it were. But with you, trying to speak to people outside of, you know, the I guess the academic sphere, you're not providing value. Like, with all due respect, if anything, you just want to, you're curious, right? I want to have 5-10 minutes of your time. I remember doing this. I saw your LinkedIn profile. It's super interesting. It's somewhere I want to be in the future. I want to see if you have 5-10 minutes to chat through your career and how I could, you know, maybe reach that level one day. I think most people in finance, they love to talk about themselves, right? So if you play that mind game and you tell someone your experience is amazing, I think why would someone not take 5-10 minutes out of their day unless they're just a terrible human being, right? So you're going to get a lot of those, by the way. But if you go through 10 no's, you're probably going to get the 11th. It's going to be a yes. That's what I'd say.
I have a personal anecdote with like a horrible experience. One time I was just speaking to people. I mean, I was like in London, I was near a bank, so I was like, okay, let me like speak to people, whatever, ask question, like maybe someone has like a 5-10 minutes to chat. So there's this one guy, I'm like, oh, you know, like, do you work here? He goes, yeah. Why? And then I kind of explain, you know, I'm a student. Do you have maybe like 5 minutes to chat, whatever? And then he goes, that's a bit weird, but okay. And then he walks away. So, yeah, like it does.
Get a yes after that.
I did.
There you go. She's a prime example.
Yeah, no, I will tell you about that later because it was really cool. But, yeah, like there are definitely good experiences, and the exposure therapy is definitely worth it because you build up kind of like not a script, but like kind of like what to say without stammering over your words and stuff. So
yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Maybe one more question. What time is it? Yeah, one more. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
So how do you see AI influencing the future of finance or private equity, especially in the areas like trading or investment decisions, or the field of where you work?
Of private equity. I think AI will have, again, in fundraising, it's you're constantly on roadshows. I mean, I'm probably traveling 75% of my time. Right, so you're constantly on the road, and that's one thing that you have to bear in mind is that if you are in fundraising or origination, traveling is part and parcel of your life, Like you're going, WD, I'm in Kuwait, Riyadh, Bahrain, you know, it's just, that's your life. So I think that's going to be less affected by AI per se. I think marrying what makes sense in the market for a particular portfolio may be where AI can have a role. Like if you're an LP, for example, and you don't want to be speaking to 20 funds, right, who a lot of them, they have the same spiel, they're going to say the same, you know, sound bites. And if you just want the correct information, what makes sense for your portfolio, I think there are certain service providers that are trying to do that within AI, right? Marrying what makes sense for the LP's portfolio and the GPs out there. Instead of, you know, speaking to 100 funds and disseminating the information, you'd have an AI perhaps platform provider that has said, okay, you know, for you, you're looking for X cash yield, these are your risk premiums, that's your profile, this makes sense for you. So maybe that would make sense. I haven't seen that come into play so far. I think in investment banking and private equity, perhaps in the junior levels, I've heard, right, with Jamie Dimon calling people cockroaches. I think I don't particularly agree with it, because how are you supposed to become a senior associate or VP if you're going to take out the whole analyst class? Like it doesn't, for me, it doesn't really make sense. I think a lot of it is about cutting costs. Some is about mistakes. Yes, a lot of analysts and interns make mistakes because you have to go there, you have to train the intern, train the analyst, make sure that they do things correctly. And so there is that J curve. So I understand it from their perspective in terms of cutting costs and speeding processes up. But I think in terms of longevity, if you don't have the junior classes that graduate into seniors, how are you going to have longevity for the firm? So I don't necessarily agree with all of it. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that can benefit from AI, but I think from just cutting people, especially in like sales and trading, I agree. I think, look, sales and trading has changed significantly. A lot of the times now, a lot of people are much more informed and they want someone to just execute an execution trade, right? And I think it helps a lot of retail investors, right? I've got X amount I want to invest. Where should I invest it? If you put it into Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever it may be, I think it assists you, right? I think so. AI in that sense helps a lot on the sales and trading side, but investment banking and private equity, maybe on the junior levels, the only advantage I see is it being, you know, cutting costs. But I think at the senior levels, I think it's going to be detrimental, because you'll have a class of analysts and interns that will never graduate. And if you don't have any of these interpersonal skills, again, a business owner that's going to be giving up, I don't know, if it's, you know, 500 million of EV of their company, you probably don't want to be speaking to a robot. You probably want to be speaking to a human being that's going to take you through the motions. And if there's a war in Iran, what does that mean to my portfolio? You probably don't want to be speaking to a robot or AI to help you solve that. So I think a balance is needed. But I think it's the AI is overvalued in certain spaces for sure. So there's pros and cons.
The second and last question from me is going to be: team should be like a Lego, as you said, and they all have the situation, all have their strengths and weaknesses, right? And lots of cheesy deals and situations. How do you make decisions and evaluate the correct outcome?
The decision is based on investing in a deal or doing what exactly?
All of like very high pressure environments.
So how to just make a decision. Again, it's team effort. Like you're not going to make a decision all on your own. So for example, even in private credit, right, the vast majority of private credit deals that we're doing are going to be sponsor backed. So we have a direct line with our private equity team who are speaking, and they've diligenced that company from an equity perspective, right? We're looking at it diligence here from a pure credit perspective. So again, looking at the debt coverage ratios, you're looking at the non-accruals, all of these things, the overall financial health. But you're going to be speaking to the private equity team because mostly they're going to be sponsor backed. So again, if we're speaking to the infrastructure team, the guys if we're providing the credit, the debt, you need to speak to the guys that are providing the equity, right? And the upside, and if the story makes sense. So it's definitely not going to be a one-man show, especially if you're in a firm that is multi-asset class. If you're in a firm that is solely a single asset class, private equity, private credit, VC, you're still going to be speaking to the whole team. The fundraisers understand exactly what the LPs require. Maybe the LPs require a secondary sale, right? That's going to affect the decision-making process of the investment team. Maybe we need to now launch a continuation vehicle, which is a secondary vehicle to solve the issues of the underlying LPs. So it's going to be a whole team effort. You can't have one deal guy that says this deal. And also you have an IC, ultimately, right? If I'm a guy who has diligenced and sourced a deal that sounds fantastic on paper, I have to run it by the IC. And the IC is going to be composed of different members from different asset classes as well. Certain people are going to come from an operational background. Does this actually make sense operationally? If we're going to invest in it now, on paper, yes, the maths may make sense, but there's actually no upside. We can't scale it, whether it's inorganic or organic or inorganic growth. So there's always checks and balances before you actually pull the trigger. It's never going to be a one-man show, irrespective of how high pressure is. Yeah.
All right, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so
Cool.
much
My
for
pleasure.
taking the time, honestly, because I can imagine you're quite busy and you just came from a little bit of a stressful situation. So honestly, I really appreciate the fact that you still took the time to, even reschedule and
My
figure
pleasure.
it out and yeah, come down to Egon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys.